All right. So we are now broadcasting. So I'm here with Becky Zartman and Sandra Montez. As people are coming in, go ahead and share where you are from and what brought you to this webinar. So I think, we have a few people cascading in. Hey, Chris, Lecky, and Tara, make sure that you share where you're from and what brought you into this webinar. David and Diane, hello, hello. We have a few people, more people coming in. Ingrid, Christine, Rebecca. So we have a few people coming in, so go ahead and share where you're from and what brought you into this stewardship webinar. And while we're in the process, I'll also go ahead and share it on Facebook, so that way we'll also be ready to go that way. Alrighty. And as you're coming in, you can share where you're from by using the chat box, which should be down below the screen. It sort of looks like the old school AOL Instant Messenger icon, and you can go ahead and type to us where you're from. And I promise that this is being recorded, so that way you will get all of our wonderful thoughts from our fabulous presenters. So don't worry, everyone. I promise I'll announce it a few times. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and go on Facebook as well. Sandra is rocking the purple shirt and purple lipstick. That's my new goal. All righty. We're going to broadcast off of Lifelong Learning. There we go. So we have 17 people here, so go ahead and share where you're from using the chat box. Oh, we have people popping in, so in that way we can learn a little bit more about you. So talking about fresh ideas for stewardship season. Actually, we're gonna manage this a little bit. So I think everybody's screen should be lighting up, and make sure that you are sharing with all people, not just with the panelists. So that's an important thing to realize as well. So in that way, other people can also see where you are from. All right. Let me go ahead. So let's see where everybody is from now. So David is from Canada. Welcome. Hey, Keith Anderson and Sue Claire from Upper Dublin, Pennsylvania. Brooks from Southern Shores, North Carolina. Diane is from Arlington. Rebecca is from South Mecklenburg Presbyterian Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. Ingrid is a South African Anglican priest serving at St. Luke's Episcopal Church in Mount Joy. Sandra, do you know her? She says hey.
Yes, I do.
And then we also have Christine from St. James in Birmingham, Michigan. Hey, Christine, I'm going to be in Michigan for an E-formation boot camp, so you should go ahead and look up that information. Rebecca and David, Chris, Maria, we have some from St. Louis. Charles from Virginia, Christine, Tara from Georgetown, Texas. Oh, and
Texas.
I was saying, Sandra, your people are here, your Texas people.
Yeah.
And Christine, you're going to be at E-formation in Michigan. Awesome. Thank you for that. I'm so excited that you will be there. And I'm trying to make sure that we are also live on Facebook. So let me go ahead and make sure. I'm going to have double screens up right now. Let's see what's going on. So as we're coming in, we have 19 people here so far to learn from Sandra and Becky. And David is on the ministry staff at High River United Church, a Canadian Union Church of the Methodist, Presbyterian, and Congregational Churches. Wow, that is quite a combination. All right, and it looks like Facebook is thinking about loading here, so I just want to make sure that we get it all set. And as people are coming in, go ahead and share what your experience with stewardship is, or if Becky and Sandra have a more interesting get to know you question, I totally welcome that as well.
Mhm.
So let's try again here. So it says that it's live on Facebook, but I'm not certain that it is. So I am having Facebook difficulties today. Let's see. So let's see what other people are saying. We now have 21 participants. So we are doing really well with our international attendance, I have to say. And we're doing some cross from some bi-coastal as well. Chris Denny says, I found good help from Cliff Christopher's work, like, quote, not your parents' offering plate. That must be a good one. So I think we should go ahead and start, ladies. Does that sound good to everybody? Yes?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, participants, you're ready to go too? Let me make sure that I'm clicking in the correct place. So Becky, would you start by sharing our inspirational scripture with us today?
Sure. And this is from Matthew, the 6th chapter. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
Mm-hmm. And this actually came up anecdotally in our conversation, so this really is thematic of our presentation today. And I'll go ahead and pray. Lord God, creator of the universe, we thank you for the gifts, talents, and abilities you have given to each of us. These are represented by the treasure we are about to collect and offer at our altars, and by the personal commitments of time and talent that are being made. May these gifts enable us more effectively to carry out the mission of the parish and the mission of the church in the world. For this we pray to the Lord. Amen.
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 So a little quick introduction for what's going to happen. I am Sarah Stonecipher. I work in the Lifelong Learning Department at Virginia Theological Seminary, and I am joined by my colleagues and in ministry and my friends who I get to see pretty frequently, I have to say. My wonderful, dear local friend, Becky Zartman, who is a bivocational priest in the Diocese of Washington, where she serves at not only at Georgetown University, but also you sort of bounce around to a lot of different places. And you are also on the Financial Stewardship and Resources Committee for the Diocese of Washington, where you help to gather people in the diocese, including this past weekend, to learn about hospitality and welcoming, but then also about stewardship and financial planning. So just a few things going on. And Sandra Montez is my dear friend in Texas. And I'm sorry, Dr. Sandra Montez. Let me get that correct. She was born in Peru, grew up in Guatemala, and settled in Texas as soon as she could. I love this, Sandra. Thank you. Her passions are God, family, especially her son, music education, writing, evangelism, discipleship, and most importantly for this workshop, stewardship. Sandra worked as a public school teacher for 21 years, earned her doctorate in education in 2016, and is now a full-time musician, translator, speaker, consultant, and writer. And she really has talked a lot about money and stewardship, especially for the Episcopal Church Foundation, where she's also a consultant. So I'm excited to have both of these phenomenal women sharing with us about what stewardship in this 21st century means. So in order to sort of give a preview of where we're going, I think it's helpful, so in that way people get sort of what the flow is. We'll start off, we're in the intro right now in case you didn't realize, and then we'll start off with stewardship and gratitude with Sandra. We'll leave some room for questions and answers, so in that way you can chat in your questions. And then we'll jump over to part 2 with Becky about first-time givers, millennials, and last gifts. I know that is quite a list, so it will be awesome to learn from her. And then these two amazing presenters, I want them to just have a conversation with each other about what we've said, and we can listen in on that. And then we'll have some availability for questions and answers as well. Well, maybe I should just say questions. I know that some of you are not able to stay for the entire time. Don't worry. All of the recording and resources will be sent out by Friday. You got to give me at least 48 hours. And so it will include a permanent link to this recording, as well as just pretty much all of the things that are listed. A pretty good bibliography will be headed your way, so not to fear. All right. So with that, I also included Becky and Sandra's contact information. So then that way we also have their brains on tap in case it is needed. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and ask Sandra to start us off with stewardship and gratitude.
Thank you, Sarah. Just a little background on me. I was born into the evangelical tradition of Christianity. And so for me, tithing, offering, and all that stuff has always been kind of second nature because I've seen it all along. So if we go to my first slide, it says the S word. And of course, we can all have different connotations when we see the S word. In this case, something that I've noticed working with the Episcopal Church, especially since Bishop Curry, we have talked a lot or heard a lot about the Jesus movement and about evangelism. A lot of people still think as evangelism as a dirty word, and along with it, we see as stewardship as a dirty word. Bishop Mark Beckwith says it so simply. I really loved it when I read this, and this is in one of the vestry papers that we share in ECF. And it says stewardship is all we do with all we have all the time. It's something super, super simple, but sometimes we get stuck on the definitions and on things that we have learned from when we were, very young or younger, I guess, for some of us. And we think of it as something like we don't know what to do with it, right? We have a yearly push for stewardship, and it means like getting little envelopes, or it means about making promises. But if we go to the next slide, you will see what I would like to do with it today, or at least for a few minutes. Deconstructing stewardship. My son and I love to watch food shows, and a lot of times people bring these plates, and they'll say like, oh, this is a deconstructed taco or a deconstructed dessert. And so I'm thinking, because I'm Peruvian, this is a deconstructed ceviche peruano. On the left, you see all the ingredients. And then on the right, you see what it comes out with. So I don't know if y'all like ceviche, but I love ceviche. And if you notice, though, in the Peruvian ceviche, we do not have tomatoes. So just FYI, if you're ever given a ceviche and it has tomato, that is not Peruvian. But when we're talking about stewardship, and if we deconstruct it and really look at the main part of stewardship, we can see that it is not just this big monster that I think sometimes we look at it, but it has a lot of components, just like the ceviche or any other thing that y'all like to make. I don't know if y'all like to cook, but I do. So I have a lot of different ingredients that sometimes, you don't see because it may be a simple recipe or a simple dish, but there are so many other things involved. So as we deconstruct stewardship, we need to come up to the why of stewardship. That's really, really important. And when I go to different places, and if y'all would please answer this question, why do we do stewardship? Why? Or why give? I guess the question should be, why am I doing that, Sarah? I'm sorry. I think I'm clicking on the wrong places for some reason.
Are you talking about the chat box?
No, on the presentation, I feel like I keep pressing without wanting to, and I'm sorry if I do.
Okay, so I'm controlling the slides, but I'm also wondering if I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and then come back to it, so then that way we can see what's going on, because there's something happening weird on my end as well.
Okay, so my question.
Right, so I'm going to try again.
Perfect. Thank you so much. The question for y'all is why? Why give? Why do we tithe? Why do we give? So Brian says stewardship is the mechanism by which we live our faith. Okay. But why? Because Jesus said so. Love it. Give out of gratitude. So the answers that I usually get whenever I go anywhere, including I usually work with a lot of bilingual congregations, and I travel to a lot of different places. But a lot of people tell me it's to keep the lights on in the building. It is to pay for what's it called, our priest's salary. John says because we took baptismal vows, etc. And I hear many, many different reasons. The thing is, we give, first of all, if we're Christians, we believe that God, it's the creator and God has given us everything. So yes, we give out of gratitude, but we also give because we hope that whatever the message we have can sustain time. So for example, it's not about keeping the lights on. It's about the message being proclaimed for other people. And that's really the why of it. It's not just to keep the lights on or just to pay a priest, but it is so that we can also just share the good news. As Christians, and I often also talk to seminarians, and a lot of times I ask them, why are you in seminary? What are you hoping to share with other people? And as Christians, in my opinion, it is to share the love of Christ. And so if I believe that what I have to offer to others is that love of Christ for everyone, the love that God has for us, then I want to give so that that message can continue to be given. I mean, we all believe in things, right? We all recently we saw a lot about Nike, and a lot of people started saying, "Oh, we're going to continue. We're going to start buying more Nike stuff." It's the same thing with our faith and our giving. I believe in the message that my church or that my organization is sharing. Therefore, I'm going to give because I want that to continue. And through that, we also do it out of gratitude. It's really all about gratitude. We give, as the Bible says, we love God because God loved us first. Same kind of principle. God has given us life. God gave us a bunch of things that we have, not only things, but feelings and people and love, etc. So we give back because we are grateful for it. So once we start thinking about stewardship as it being because we want the message of Christ's love to be spread for everyone, and because we are grateful, we have a whole different view of that money that we put on the plates. And so that is I think that is the very foundation of our giving. It must be because of the love of Christ and because we are grateful for that. David says, why to offer gratitude and deepen the relationship we have with God. That's a great answer as well. So,
does anybody else have any answers about why stewardship and why gratitude matters to them and to their parish and to their context? Sandra, how has gratitude played an effort and strong role in your own stewardship and your own giving? That's a very personal question. I just dove into that extra layer.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Again, when I grew up, my parents are the ultimate examples for me about love of Christ and about God. I always thought of God as a woman because my mom was the one who shared more love to us when we were little, because my dad, as a pastor, he was usually not there. And so, but we saw the example of their gratitude towards God and giving of what we didn't have. We grew up poor, so we didn't have extra things and extra money to give. But the 10% was always taken out before anything else. So it's something that I grew up with, and not to sound like, oh, if you give God $10, God's going to give you 20. Not to sound like that kind of gospel, kind of cheap gospel. But I do have many stories in my life where I have felt that the fact that I gave then brought somebody else giving to me, or the world giving to me, or God giving to me. And it's out of that gratitude that I've had as a single mother, with a doctorate, and my son has a master's. I mean, no debt. There's a lot, and working, as a teacher. So it's not like I had these, incredible jobs that made a lot of money. It wasn't like that, but it's just seeing that just God, working in my life, through my life, and through others, to show that love and that generosity and the gratitude. It's like a cycle that goes, a long way, and it's very interesting to see it, and to believe it. I believe in miracles, and I believe in all that. I know, like, some people don't, and that's fine, but I do, and I see God's hand in everything that comes my way, and that I am able to give also.
Mm-hmm. And I noticed that Elizabeth keeps raising her hand. If you use the chat box, you can respond directly to Sandra. And so I just wanted to make sure that everyone's voices were heard. And Ingrid said, as well, I'll be Ingrid's voice. I understand now the connection you make between stewardship and evangelism. It's a task of shifting the parish worldview of, quote, supporting our own church and paying the bills, to, quote, sharing the love and the good news.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And then Rebecca comments, it's also to help us orient ourselves in a larger narrative.
Right. And, the thing I think also is, a lot of people are afraid to talk about stewardship. We're afraid to, make people upset, or for people to be like, oh, here we go. It really depends how you bring it up. As a teacher for 21 years, with kids that were always, a lot of times bored of being at school and learning how to read or about math, if I brought the information with fear and being like, okay, guys, I know y'all don't like stewardship, but we're going to talk about it, then that's how people felt. But if I brought it up like, oh my God, we're going to talk about stewardship, we're going to talk about gratitude, and I'm excited about it, and not fake, being authentically excited, then people will respond. At least that's what I have seen in churches and schools and different places like that. But we just have to not be afraid of speaking these truths that are important in our church life, especially in our denomination.
I love that. I love that, of like being authentically passionate about stewardship and not making it a chore.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Love it. Does anybody have any questions for Sandra? Before I did just put questions. John did ask, how does an understanding mission impact stewardship? Understanding. John, can you share a little bit more about that? Becky, do you have any questions for Sandra as we wait for the other ones to come in? All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump over to Becky, and let her talk about an understanding of mission. Okay, that's what. So John was saying, how does an understanding of mission impact stewardship?
I think it's like, we're supposed to spread the word into the world, right? I think when we do see ourselves as all of us evangelists and all of us missionaries, and all of us also being a part of that discipleship, stewardship, and evangelism triangle or triad, however you want to see it, we will also know that we are being expanding this kingdom, however you want to call it, of Christ in the world. And, just sharing that love and that message of love and of hope that everybody needs. When we do understand what we can do, then we are I'm thinking in Spanish, we are more apt to open our hearts and hands to give. I think, at least that's what I've seen when I've been with churches that are very mission minded, and not just, about going out, but also in their own little communities and in their own churches, about giving and expanding that generosity and gratitude.
Awesome. All right. we're going to jump over. Thank you, Sandra. I can't wait to get you two talking to each other and let other people listen in, because I already had the privilege of that earlier this week. So Becky is going to share about the disparate topics, some more disparate than others, first-time givers, millennials, and last gifts. I want to let you know that as a millennial, I could not actually spell millennial. Luckily, Google spell check was there for me, and I really appreciate it. So, all right, so take it away, Becky.
Awesome. Okay, you can, yeah. I just want to talk about, I use millennial pink.
I noticed.
Okay, so, and actually go to the next slide. Mm-hmm. Okay, so something that happens when people talk about millennials is that they assume they're talking about teenagers. But actually, according to Pew, millennials were born between the years of 1981 and 1997. So millennials are actually 21 to 37 years old, roughly. And so that means that they're right in the age where people are starting to give to church for the first time. Like you're establishing your own household, you are deciding to go to church of your own volition entirely. And if you're doing that, you are making an adult step to be a part of an adult congregation. So, yeah. So my shorthand for whether someone's a millennial or not on the younger edge is whether or not if they remember September 11th. Mm-hmm. So if you don't remember a time before September 11th, you're probably a Generation Z. If you were in your formative years when that happened, then you are probably a millennial. So I am going to self-disclose. I am a millennial. As a 33-year-old, I'm like on the older side of that, but I am smack dab in the middle of that cohort. So this is my life, right? Okay, next slide. So the top number is the median income for millennials in 2016, which was $38,000, almost $39,000. The bottom number is the median student loan debt for a millennial in 2016. So whenever you hear about millennial stereotypes, this probably has something to do with it. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on with this generation. So next slide. So you might have seen in the last decade or so all of these news reports saying that millennials are killing things. So someone made a collage, and I think it's hilarious. But you know, it's actually a reminder, like millennials have killed things because we just don't have that much money. So I graduated from college in 2007, and in 2008, the financial aid crisis hit, and a lot of people, many of my peers who had taken out large student loans because they were told to do so, because college was a gateway to the middle class and all of this, graduated from college into an economy where they couldn't get jobs. Mm-hmm. So they are just behind. They're just behind. And so rent is high, pay is low, like wages have been stagnant. Student loan debts are huge, and everything's changing. We've had to change our habits. So a lot of people have lived with their parents. People live in group houses for long periods of time. My takeaway that I would like you to do is please don't berate millennials who are actually showing up at church for not giving as much as you think they should be giving, because it's just a different world. If you're a person who was, if you're a boomer or an Xer, you're just kind of born into a different, an American boomer or Xer, you're born into a totally different way of young adulthood than what millennials are doing and dealing with it. So I wanted to talk about, like, given all of this background of like where millennials are, what can we actually do to help them understand the importance of stewardship, help us understand the spiritual discipline of giving and why it's important and all of that stuff. So, okay, next slide. Hashtag millennial problems. So I wanted to talk about transparency and budgeting. Because I'd like to think about what's happened during a typical millennial's life. So we were the last generation to remember life before a smartphone. But we were also a generation that was changed by September 11th and the ensuing war, by the financial crisis and the promise of college evaporating. We're also a generation that has been very shaped by the Me Too movement. We've seen scandal after scandal hit all of the institutions that we were told to trust. So I'm from Central Pennsylvania. The Penn State, Joe Paterno, Jerry Sandusky stuff was just like absolutely awful for all of the reasons, but also, you know, like we just watched her. So it's a Catholic church, it's our big universities, it's politics, it's entertainment. And like, why would we trust institutions? We don't generally, because they're not worthy of our trust. And so that's why I wanted to talk about transparency. You need to show millennials that you are worthy of their trust. By the way, this is probably good for everybody, right? Like this isn't just a millennial thing. Like all age cohorts would think this is a great idea. But especially for millennials, we've been so shaped by all of these scandals that have rocked everything that you need to show us that our money, which is a scarce commodity for many millennials, is actually worth giving to the church itself. I have a friend who likes to say that young adults in church are like frogs in the ecosystem. In that when there are frogs in the ecosystem, it means the water is clean and everything's humming along right. Like you need a pristine ecosystem for amphibians to thrive. And so young adults are just like that. They're like a good marker of how healthy and transparent your church is. And so I'm not saying your church can't be healthy without young adults, but you can be pretty sure that if there are young adults around, you're doing something right. Okay, so next slide, please. So something else you can do to help millennials just in general is to talk about money, like really talk about money and teach about money. Something we don't talk about very much in the Episcopal Church is that 40 parables by Jesus are about money. Jesus talked about money, all 40, more than any other thing. Jesus talked about money. So when you put that all together, it says like Jesus is talking about it. Why aren't we talking about it? It's not okay. So there are two main programs that parishes can do that would be suited for Episcopal churches or mainline churches. Financial Peace University helps people, it teaches people the basics of budgeting, and it teaches them like just really basic stewardship practices, and it helps people get out of debt, and it helps people make a financial plan. And usually that plan involves giving to the church, because if you don't have any money, you can't give. So it's just like management and stuff. And it's like a 6-week series, and then you can run, a lot of churches that do it run it every single year. And it's a huge help. It's a long-term thing. So it's probably not something you can do right now for the stewardship season. But as you're thinking, if you are the person who is in charge of the stewardship, or you are a rector or whatever, who gets to decide about these things, like I cannot recommend this enough. My bishop, Mary Ann Buddy, just got back from a sabbatical where she spent 3 months looking at programs like these. And these are her two highest recommendations. The other one is Enough by Adam Hamilton, who's a Methodist pastor.
I know with Financial Peace, like it comes like with like videos, like worksheets. Is that the same thing with Enough as well?
It's Enough is a book, but it's got that same kind of like leadery kind of thing. Financial Peace is more involved, but it does really wonderful things. Like it has changed lives. So there's another one called Crown, but that's really more further on the evangelical side. And then there are some parishes that decide to do it themselves. They may have people in their parish who are financial advisors. They may have people who are accountants. They may have people who could like put together their own version of this, teach people how to do a household budget, teach people how to set goals, teach people how to set up retirement, that kind of stuff. So there's the DIY option as well. Okay, so
Chris says that that Enough does have a DVD.
Oh, great!
And Chris has used it in 2 churches. So
Gosh,
another thumbs up.
Yay, that's great. Thanks, Chris. I'm much more familiar with financial peace. So the next one, and so my bigger question is like, what can you do now for this stewardship season to help your millennials and people giving first-time gifts give gifts? First of all, set up electronic giving. I pay my babysitters a Venmo. They don't really want cash. Like they'll take cash, but they're like, wow, I have cash in my wallet. Like if your only ways of having people give are by cash or by check, many millennials don't even have checkbooks. So you're just not going to be able to collect money from them. Even if you want, right, yeah. Like I have one of my husband's like, why do you have a checkbook? And I'm like, spiritual director, you know? You know? So set up electronic giving. So you could do that, but try to avoid credit cards if you can, because they take a cut out, or PayPal takes a cut out. Look into monthly deposits. Banks will often do that for free, and then people can just set it and forget it. And that's really, and also when you think about what millennials are used to, they're very used to giving online. Think about Kickstarter and those myriad other things where you can set up your own fundraiser. And they're also used to doing it on social media. So you could set something up and be like, just like, hey, just ask, right? Like that's a lot of stewardship. The caveat I will give to that is millennials are much more used to giving $5 a month to their favorite podcast than they are to giving a very substantial gift. So oftentimes it's about getting them started and then helping and then educating them about how much things actually cost in the church. Okay, next slide. So you might want to give something back. Sarah actually helped me remind me about this, but like, dude, like the NPR tote bag is a thing because it works. Okay. They wouldn't do it if it didn't work. And by the way, millennials love this. Like literally I work on a college campus and students have NPR tote bags. So give something tangible. Another thing under this, I would like to encourage you to do, if you're still passing the plate, like I know most churches still pass plates at church, you might think about laminating some cards that say, I gave electronically. So it's not just like you're handing, you know, like you're like the plate goes by and you feel bad because you didn't put anything in it, but you don't have any cash in your wallet, then it's awkward, but you're giving electronically every month. So like just keep them in the pews and then people can throw them in and then you put them right back in the pews. It's very recyclable, but like it helps people feel like they're part of a bigger thing. Okay, next slide. So one of the last things I want to say about millennials and giving is that it's really important to focus on a cause, not an institution. So if you remember that millennials don't trust institutions all that much, if you say like the church needs this, like that's not very compelling. But if you can paint a picture about what you would do, that's a different thing entirely. Tell a story about how the church has changed someone's life. Invite your young adults to talk to their parish about how the church has changed their lives. You might consider doing a narrative budget. So instead of having just like a spreadsheet with the numbers on it, have your numbers tell a story. Like literally write where the money went and why it went there and what you were able to do with it. And that'll change and it'll help other people understand what they really need the money for. You can tell those stories in church. You can tell those stories on social media. You know, and if you focus it around the gospel and what's going on in our mission in the world, millennials are way more likely to hop on board than if you just said, this is what we always do. This is what your parents did. This is whatever, you know, like, no, just like tell the story about why it matters. The last thing I wanted to say, since I said I would talk about last gifts, by which I mean planned giving, which is when you write a gift for the church into your will. So because of the things, the way how far behind millennials have started, we're not sure that millennials are ever actually going to have the wealth accumulation that boomers have. That's just what it is, especially with the disparate, like the top wealthiest people keep getting wealthier and the gap keeps growing and the middle class is shrinking. We just don't know what it's going to be like. We don't. But one thing you can do right now is encourage people in your stewardship campaigns, whatever age, to, and this could be really simple. Put a box on your pledge card that says, talk to me about planned giving. You could have a workshop. I don't know. So like the Episcopal Church, we've got lots of lawyers. Ask a lawyer, or maybe coordinate with your diocese. Some lawyers will write wills for free if you leave a gift to the church that you both go to. You could do a wraparound thing where you talk, like I have a rector friend who calls it Thy Will Be Done, and they do advanced directives and they talk about wills, but they also they plan your funeral. And they talk about what it means, what is a good death, and what does it mean when somebody dies, and what does it mean for you, and what do we believe about the afterlife, and all of those things. And those conversations are much easier to have when people are not actively dying. Mm-hmm. It's a part of Christian formation to talk about what happens when we die. We need to have those conversations. So this is an opportunity right now. I believe that all of the buildings that we've been given are gifts from the past church to our present church. If we want to keep those buildings, which can be amazing tools for ministry, we need to keep them in good shape, and that costs money. And those are exactly the kind of things that planned giving can be really good for, creating endowment to take care of the church buildings so that we can pass them on to future generations as well. So I think that's it for me, Sarah.
That was a lot.
It was a lot. I talk really fast too. I'm sorry, everybody. If you have questions, you can follow up on the side.
I safe to say that the talking heads in this presentation all talk really fast. So
buckle up.
It's true. So I actually, before we get to questions, I just want to just do like sort of a little response between the two of you, like about your about like each other's presentation, because like again, I got to witness an amazing discussion, and so I hope that others can sort of like hear your back and forth as well. So what sort of stuck out to you from each other's presentation? And as I was going to warn Sandra that she was on mute, but she's already got it. Knows how to work it.
I think the first thing that I noticed is, since I was thinking about a certain age cohort, that actually everything we said applies to everybody. Mm-hmm. Like all of the actual tactile things that we were talking about, the things you can actually do about gratitude, that's something for millennials. That's something that is, a Christian virtue, actually. So that's great.
Yeah, and when you were talking, I kept thinking about people of color, especially Latinos and Latinas and Latinx, because about transparency, how important it is. A lot of our churches don't share many things because, as I was telling you guys earlier, sometimes our priests make 3-4 times more than the average churchgoer in our churches, and so it's hard sometimes to talk about that. I love the part about stories. I mean, Latinos are just, we're storytellers all the time, and one of the things that we have learned is that it's so important for lay people to share their stories, whatever age they may be. But like you're saying, a lot of times we give a lot. We want millennials in our churches. We want young families. And yet when you look at your budget lines for, whatever it is that you want, it's not there, right? Like we say, that's part of stewardship too. That's part of our church stewardship practices. If we say we want youth, but we don't have any money going towards a youth program or towards a youth minister, then, we really don't want it, right? At least that's how I see it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know that I think the visual of showing where money is also applies to I'm speaking as a millennial. Like, I know that like I would be fine appearing in, you know, my yoga studio's newsletter, or at the place where I work or the place where I attend church. But that's because, you know, I show up with my 2 feet for attendance, but I also then back those places with my money. And so I think that to me is really that it's not just my body showing up, but it's also my wallet, and it's also sort of my endorsement of that place. So we've had a few questions come in. No one should be surprised. The lifelong learning folk are inquisitive. So I believe it was the Reverend McDowell asked, bank electronic checks do not actually require any online setup as part of the church. That is correct. But I think were you talking about like a direct bank-to-bank transfer, Becky?
Yes, you can do that. Yeah. That's another thing that you can just do it, but you need to help people know that it's there and then get it set up.
Yeah.
And so that's a matter of education, and oftentimes the individual reach out. It takes a little upfront work to get it really set up and going, but once you can set it and forget it.
Yeah. And so he also wondered if I'm assuming it's a he, I'm sorry. Also wondered if there were any online giving options that do not take a percentage.
So Venmo doesn't take a percentage, which made me really wonder, like, where does Venmo get their money? Right?
I wondered that too.
It turns out so people leave balances in Venmo and they do micro trading with it. And they lend against it. And so knowing that people are just going to leave the same, like my college students have the same, it's like, it just goes around in a circle. Like they're like, oh, I'm paying you for pizza, I'm paying for you, whatever. And then you have a balance in Venmo and they use that money to pay. Then they invest it and then they get their money back. And then they have more money. So that's how they're using your money. You're not getting interest on it, but they're earning interest on it. And that's how they get the money. But it means that the service is free.
Right.
And the other thing to remember about Venmo is if it says blah, 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 gave to Grace Episcopal Church, everybody sees it.
Yep.
Because
you can like it.
Mm-hmm.
And they can
like it.
I do wonder if any parishes have set up Venmo in terms of donating. I could easily understand like paying for ski trips for youth events, or like picnics or pancake supper or something like that. And so I wonder if that's the case. Reverend McDowell also says Venmo takes a percentage if you use a credit card to pay, however.
Yeah, but if it's linked to your bank account,
right,
then it's not, there's no money taken out. So that would be something to consider.
Let's see, there was another question. I'm scrolling. I think there was a good conversation about killing Applebee's. I'm glad that the millennials have killed Applebee's.
That's my dad's favorite place, guys.
Oh my God.
To be fair, my dad also loves a chain. We're just throwing our parents underneath the bus. I'm so sorry. Gary asks, what ways do you like to incorporate the biblical instructions regarding our responsibilities to give back a portion of the blessings we receive? You want me to repeat that again?
Sure.
What ways do you like to incorporate the biblical instructions regarding our responsibilities to giving back a portion of the blessings we receive?
I often say we are the people of the book, the Episcopal Church, right? And a lot of people are, oh, of course, we're the Book of Common Prayer. I'm like, no, we're part of the Bible. Like, that's our book. So for me, I love using the Bible for anything, all these verses, the bad and the good. And to me, I have used those. The thing is, like, you need to know who you're speaking to and with. You need to see what people are responding to as well. And as pastors, y'all should know your congregations. If you don't, that's a totally different webinar. But, you have to know what they respond to. And if they do respond to biblical stuff, which they should, because, we should be using the Bible all the time, then I don't think there's anything wrong with going to like the tithing and all that stuff, all those wonderful Bible verses about if you give, God will give, or God gave you, so give, etc. But it's to use it not to judge people. That's what as part of, as a recovering evangelical, it's, you always felt like you had to give, because if you didn't, you were going to get killed and all these things. You have to be very careful about using the Bible as for what I believe it is meant for, as a loving way, for us to know, okay, these are the, some things that we should do, or these are stories about God's faithfulness and God's love. So I always talk about also, like, we talk about tithing. Some people, including priests, are not there. They're at 1% of their giving. There may be at 2%, etc. They may tithe with their time and not only with their money. So there's, a lot of different ways to talk about the Bible references, I think.
I'm always like, let's talk about what Jesus said. Yeah, like, it's the verse that we started with at the beginning of this presentation. Like, what is actually important to you? Who are you actually following? Who shapes your life? Why are you making the decisions you make? And for me, and Sarah, poor Sarah, has to listen to me beat this drum all the time. But I have a big thing with like the Episcopal Church doesn't have an evangelism problem. It has a formation problem. Mm-hmm. The Episcopal Church doesn't have a stewardship problem. It has a formation problem. Because we're talking about when we don't have a grounding of a relationship with God and its diverse spiritual disciplines and ways, we're going to have anemic giving. We just are, because giving is an outpouring of a living relationship with God. It's so easy to give when you feel like you've been given so much. But if you don't, and we need to work on getting our people there. We just do. And so that's like, I don't know what that exactly looks like. That's a way bigger, like it's a dissertation. That's a lifetime of work on formation. That's all kinds of things. But that's something to think about as you go into your stewardship season. Like, this is just one piece of forming people into full-fledged mature Christians.
Mm-hmm.
So Brian has a question about credit cards. And so I have my own thoughts about credit card giving. And he says, I understand the advice against credit card giving. However, on the other end, some people are motivated by earning points. Our Faith and Finance team, which I love that name, by the way, Brian, our Faith and Finance team has really wrestled over credit card giving in an age of indebtedness, but it seems to be the default for lots of folks. Thoughts on responsibility versus convenience?
We've been talking about this a lot at the Strategic Financial Resources Commission. It's percolated a couple times. There's a generational difference for Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace, and he's actually editing it because he's very much like he's a cash person, but millennials are not cash people. And it doesn't make sense. So if you have one credit card that you're using responsibly, and you're paying off the balance every month, that's fine. Something that we do ask at a parish that I used to be working at, which is if you're going to pay by credit card, please pay an extra 3% to cover the cost so that we actually get your gift, like your whole gift.
And I do that on Eventbrite as well. When I'm asking for people to register for things, I then click, if people can also pay the credit card fees, and for $150, I think it's $5, so it's $155 rather than $150. And I think a majority of people do end up paying it to pass along the fees. So completely worth it.
I think it's also what Becky was saying, though. When we have a culture of formation in our churches, when we are often using any sort of Bible verse or any sort of day to talk about money, responsibility, being responsible with what God has given you, being a good steward, etc., these things just kind of fall into place because we're talking about it, not in a, I'm going to beat your head over it with something, but when we're authentically and responsibly talking about these subjects openly, I think we can always include about responsibility, about not getting into debt, etc. Just like matter of factly, and so I think like what Becky's saying, just formation is very, very important for stewardship and really anything that has to do with the church.
I love this example that Carlene gave. She said a couple of years ago, and keep your ears open because this is totally something you could do really easily as part of stewardship season. A couple of years ago, I tried to reinforce tithing to children by asking them to bring in 10% of their Halloween candy and donating it to a fundraiser. The kids seemed to really get it. And she says, Carlene also mentioned for electronic giving, she says we're putting an E on the sticker of name tags of people who give electronically. So that's pretty cool. So then that way, like, you can actually ask of like, was it a complicated process? So that's helpful. I like that.
And I also like Becky's idea of the little card because I give electronically, and I do feel like a dork, especially, when I go to my brother's church or my dad's church where, they're the pastors and I'm just there sitting and they're looking at me like, oh, you're not giving? Why should I give? And it's like, no, I really promise I did give, but you just don't see it. So
I think like other people have like made like poker chips, like, or like, so the cash chips in that way.
I love that.
Yeah, there is the ongoing debate around some circle of my friends of where when will the donation plate end up with like a slide or a swipe on it. I'm totally prepared for it. I'm totally prepared for it.
Yeah.
So I think we're about to wrap up. So ladies, thank you once again for joining me. I have posted up our contact information again for Sandra, Becky, and for myself. So then that way you can reach out if you have any other questions. I will send out a list of all of the resources and electronic links, including some articles that Sandra and Becky recommend, a bibliography, as Becky referred to it as. And I'll also be posting this video on the Lifelong Learning Facebook page and as well as on the Building Faith page. So in that way you can have access to all of the different resources. So again, Sandra and Becky, you all were so fabulous, and I cannot thank you enough for being a part of this conversation and for really leading the discussion on a national level. And so I really appreciate it. So,
thank you.
And then within Lifelong Learning, we are doing monthly webinars. And so our next webinar is actually about Advent. Don't tell anyone. It's about Advent, and we're talking about Advent in October, believe it or not. Yeah.
That's when people are planning for Advent, though.
It's true. It's true.
Great. Yeah, get ahead of the ball. Do it in October.
Exactly. And Sandra's already ready with her purple. So she's thinking ahead, friends, and you should be too. So join us in October to start thinking about Advent. So then that way you can plan a little bit more before December hits. Advent starts December 2nd, I think. So just as a forewarning. Be warned. So thank you once again. My name is Sarah Stonecipher, and this webinar has been brought to you by Lifelong Learning at VTS. And I have been joined by my fabulous colleagues, Becky Zartman and Sandra Montez. So thank you once again for joining me and sharing all of your wisdom. So I look forward to working with you both soon.
Thanks, Sarah.
Bye, friends.
Thank y'all. Bye.
Do we do it?
I stopped the live stream. So I think hold on, let me pause the recording. That's helpful.